Welcome to the Sacred Work podcast, a space to cultivate deep self-awareness and self-trust through the language of ancient and not so ancient modalities within the framework of our devotion to our sacred work, a remembering of our inner wisdom and our magic, a restoring of our mind, body and soul connection, and reconnecting with the gentle courage to share ourselves with the world. Hi, Sylvia here, and I would love to welcome you to the very first episode of the Sacred Work podcast. I'm not quite sure where we're going, but we're going anyway. Like the fool in tarot, we are leaping off that cliff and just seeing what lies ahead. I hope you join me. Goodness, where do I begin? March has been intense, and I know I'm not alone in this. So if you too are feeling the shifts, know that I'm with you. A lot has changed, and yet nothing seems to have changed. To put words around it, to clothe it with words seems almost impossible, and yet here I am attempting to make sense of it all through words. And the question that lingers is, where did it all start? It all started with a breath. It all started with the nudge to want to show up in a community in ways I haven't before. It all started with saying yes to a magical circle. And yet it all started with astrology, with human design. It all started with the accident. It all started with standing in the kitchen on that morning in January, realizing I might be autistic. It all started with shifting and changing what I value and what I want to be out there. But more importantly, how I want to feel in here, inside of me. It all started with forcing something that was not mine. In a way, it all started with my weight loss journey. But then it all started with my Saturn return whilst studying photography. Or perhaps it all started with financial struggles and barely being able to provide for myself prior to that. It all started with lying in the deep snow, staring at the Milky Way in the Arctic Circle. It all started with taking a job that went against my flow. I know that now. It all started with leaving a job that frustrated me. It all started with changing my location. It all started with studying art. Or perhaps it all started with a heartbreak. Or perhaps it all started with moving countries. Or perhaps it all started with the best, most nourishing friendships I've ever had. It all started with leaving my home country. It all started with not being accepted to university. Maybe it started with my dad's passing, or my grandma's passing, or my brother's accident, or my dad's alcoholism, or my grandpa's passing. Maybe it all started with bullying and body shaming. Or maybe it all started with my birth. Maybe it all started with my mum carrying me. Maybe it started with her lived experience prior to my conception. And we could just carry on. Maybe it all started with my grandma being abandoned as she was preparing to enter this world. Maybe it all started with my great-grandma and whatever the circumstances were around my grandma's conception. Or maybe it goes back generations I no longer have physical access to. And yet, breath is what connects us all. This transmission came to me yesterday. I'm recording this episode on the 1st of April. And it was, in a way, inspired and brought to me by the words of Dennis Lewis in his book, The Tao of Natural Breathing. And I'd love to read a little section of it. Dennis Lewis says, "Every time we exhale, we return to these atoms to the atmosphere to be renewed for both present and future generations. Every time we inhale, we absorb oxygen expelled into the atmosphere as a waste product by the Earth's plant life. Every time we exhale, we expel carbon dioxide as a waste product into the atmosphere, where it can eventually be absorbed by the same plant life. In nature, nothing is wasted. Our breath is a link in the cosmic ecology, in the conservation, transformation, and exchange of substances in nature's complex metabolism. It connects our so-called inner world with the vast scale of the outer world, of the earth and its atmosphere, as well as of all organic life, through the perceptible alternation of yin and yang, of negative and positive, of emptying and filling. The process of breathing, if we can begin to understand it in relation to the whole of life, shows us the way to let go of the old and open to the new. It shows us the way to experience who and what we actually are. It shows us the way to wholeness and well-being." Thank you, Dennis Lewis. I experienced my first conscious breathing workshop last weekend. I've since tried to clothe the experience with words, and yet all I have is a sensed experience of my whole being. I entered a space within I'd never been before. I felt things I'd never felt before. And I feel that I came out of it a little less fragmented. I came out of it with a full body knowing of the power of breath. I came out of it with a full body knowing of my essence. And the word essence literally means to be. And the question I've been pondering since is, how can we restore our essence? That essence to me is our mind, body, and soul connection. So often we are fragmented. We rarely bring our whole selves to our lived experiences. We hide parts of ourselves from each other, from our deep-rooted fears which only disconnect us more from ourselves, but more so from each other. And we all have a different version of these fears: rejection, abandonment, failure, the discomfort of being seen, being witnessed, shame, guilt, and the list goes on, right? From my own lived experience, it is so often that the mind overrides everything else, and yet it is the breath that has shown me that it is possible to bring all three to our lived experiences. And I had my first experience with that this week. I showed up in magical spaces with the trust that whatever needed to be vocalized will be the right thing. I trusted that I was able to be present with my own essence, whilst my body and my mind were having their own experience. I was in a way forced to slow down and trust that I was able to access that essence as I was invited to speak from a place of my being. And the words that emerged after these experiences were the following: it is okay to slow down. It is okay to pause and feel the words that want to be vocalized. You are safe in your body. All of these experiences were very cathartic. I was simply witnessed without any validation of my words. As someone who chews on the words spoken afterward, I didn't have the same experience this time. I was at peace with myself and the words that emerged. I didn't have the need to analyze them because deep down I knew they were the truth at that moment. I didn't need them to be validated because of that same reason. In human design, my digestion style is calm touch. The phrase calm presence has been coming up a lot when people describe me and reflect back to me my way of being in this world. And I almost feel like that's an affirmation that I am starting to embody my design from my mental, physical, and spiritual body, and not just intellectually. But I'm only now, after 2 years of intellectual studies of the various modalities that I practice, starting to really lean into that embodiment of the energies that are present in my physical body. I'm only now starting to lean into trusting the wisdom of my body. This, to me, reflects that I'm starting to consciously be in my own body. I'm starting to consciously sense my physical body, but also the mental and the spiritual. And I'm starting to consciously hold them and experience them. And the realizations, the insights have been truly profound. I've realized that this is what it means to hold our whole selves. This is what it means to be with our whole selves. This is what it means to experience our whole selves and to connect with our whole selves. This is our wholeness, our health. And health literally means to be whole. To heal means to become whole. So this is what it means to be in one's own essence. And I'm only at the beginning of that journey. And I know now that even the timing of it is right on time. And once we get here, we lose the desire to want to compare ourselves, because we know now that everyone has their own essence. But it doesn't mean that we will never compare ourselves, because we are still having this very human experience. But it is with certain practices that we can bring ourselves back to our own essence. And this is what belonging to our own bodies is about. Self-belonging, self-love, self-compassion. They all start with connecting to our own breaths. And then when we take that practice out into the world, we recognize the essence of others. So there really is no need to compare. There is only an invitation to connect. And I want to thank Ben from the breathing space here, who has played quite a big role in these realizations. Our connection to ourselves is where all the other connections start. There is such freedom in taking a breath with oneself. And that freedom leads to walking our unique paths with our fears alongside us and not leading us. This makes me think of the gene keys and how we are not meant to fix our shadows, but rather meet them with acceptance, because they too are a part of our whole being. So as we're embarking on this journey, I would love to invite us into taking a breath together. A long and deep inhale followed by a long and deep exhale. Thank you for being here. Thank you for joining me on this remembering journey. And I'd love to hear from you as we are at the start of it. What comes up for you when you hear the words devotion to our sacred work? What does the mind, body, and soul connection mean to you? Can't wait to hear your reflections. Sending you so much love. I will speak to you soon. Sylvia.